So when it comes to laying out UVs, we do need to think about a handful of things, like edge padding. And if you go over to the Polycount forum and you check out edge padding, it has tons of good information for you. But basically, based on your resolution, you're going to have some form of padding. Now, this is scalable in proportion to each other. So as you downres, this is going to proportionally change. So let's say we wanted to do this guy at a 2048 texture or a 1024. You'll notice half of 2048 is 1024. Half of 16 is 8. So as far as this goes, ratio-wise, you're fine. Now, how we can do this is by coming here to modify layout and then making a couple adjustments. So down here, you can see that we have our texture map size, and then we have shell padding and tile padding here. And we also have this by either pixels or UVs. I like to do it by pixels, which is the default. But let's say we wanted to make this pretty and do 2046 with it. We could then set the shell padding to 16 and the tile padding to 16. Now, one of these is the outside, that's the tile, I believe, and shell is in between these. Now, there's a couple more things I want to start with for this, which is going to be to have preserve 3D ratios turned on, and to make sure shells in terms of rotation is off, same with the pre-rotation. That's because we just laid these out, we have them facing the way we want. So if I go ahead and hit apply now, what we have is a nice UV layout that we can utilize and start adjusting to be a little bit more optimized for what we're aiming for. Now, what can be even more useful is using this layout on the things that matter. So there's only a handful of things in here that don't really matter for our character. Ironically, the entire head is one of them, because if you look at the design of our character, we're pretty much just going to apply some sort of a gradient here from the neck up, or maybe even just leave it black like we have here. So it doesn't matter too much. So what I could do is actually move this off to the side. And then I could select individual areas here that don't matter as much either. For example, the interior of the helmet doesn't really matter, and I know that's the interior. On the body here, we have the interior of the body, which is here. It's going to be that base area. We don't have a neck interior because we kept the head part of the mesh, which is fine. On the shoulders here, we don't really need the interior to the shoulder, which is down here. On the legs, we don't need the interior to the legs, so that would be this one here. We also may not need the base of the foot, but I like to keep it in there because often when a character's running, you see the base. Now, with those set to the side, we could actually select all of these in face mode and redo the layout and hit apply, and this is going to give us what matters. Now, we also might want to do some rotations. For example, what would happen if you rotated the gloves this way, since everything big and chunky is long ways? That would use the space a little bit wiser, potentially. And what we could do is we could start sprinkling in the other things and manually laying this out. Now, I'm going to backpedal, though, because I'm debating if that actually was better or not. And the best way to check is, looking at the squares here. You can rotate something a different way and then come in and hit apply and see if the squares get bigger or smaller. So in that case, they got smaller, which means that's good. Smaller squares means more detail. And we could just take these things now and we could sprinkle them in as needed into here at a scale that's appropriate. So these, ironically, don't really need to be big or small. Now on the head, if I'm going to apply a gradient, I might just bring it into here. And this is where game art is a bit different than film. You can scale things up or down depending on the resolution to push more detail to those areas. In film, we generally have the ability to use infinite size maps, so we don't really worry about that so much. But when it comes to game stuff, we want to be, as mindful of our space as possible. I also might leverage some of these squares a little bit better and playing around with the location of some of these things, like the kneecap here. The backside of the kneecap I also don't really need. I forgot about that. I can place that over there. In which case, I could take something like this kneecap and scale its size to give it a little bit more detail. And just to kind of keep things in a common locality, I could take this here and I could scale this down, like so. And we could even play around with the orientation of these a bit more, just kind of maintaining some spacing so we don't have any issues later on with what's called MIP maps. That's when we see things from far away. We have another sort of circular area here, and we could fill that in with maybe the pauldron. This is where, like I mentioned, we can scale this down because we aren't going to see the underside of the pauldron ideally, right? We might see it a bit though, you know, if it angles up. So it's one of those things where you have to think about it. It's like if the pivot of this is going to be back here somewhere and it does rotate up, you know, how much are you going to see? What angles do you see the character from? But it kind of depends. We can always adjust it later if needed. This interior of the helmet's pretty large here, so I want to sneak it into a good spot if I can find a good spot. I may also, you know, play around with looking at these curved angles to see if some of these could fit somewhere better, or even doing something like this, where it's like, okay, if I curve this way and move this over, you know, then I can maybe move this head up into this space a little bit more. And every UV layout is going to be completely different, which is worth noting. There's no predictability to this stuff. At the end of the day, a lot of this is just so random that I can't give you any patterns or anything to look for. But there are things you can do, like these smaller pieces. You know, it's like, okay, well, if I move these up into here, because I took the time to straighten these, this is, you know, why we did that, is if these are straightened out, then these edges, you know, they line up better, and we can basically move things around and really cram them in a corner, which makes a lot more freedom in these areas to make adjustments. So for example, with this horn, now that I have this here, this could kind of start to fill that negative space more, possibly. I don't think it does though, but we could, you know, play around with the rotation of this if we find it fits somewhere else better, potentially. We can kind of sneak that in there. And we can play around with swapping shapes and, you know, different spots and just kind of tweaking things in terms of their distances. So getting something like the bottom of the shoe down there. Then we have sort of these bizarre negative spaces here that might be able to fit something like this, which is the belt buckle. I think I have the best bet right here, kind of turning that sideways and into there. And you'll see a handful of these things are going to be oddballs, but they're the smaller pieces. Now with this, I can kind of cram the interior of the helmet here. That's going to at least give me a decent amount of detail for the interior. You'll notice I didn't scale the head down much. That's because if I do go the route of a gradient, I want to have enough detail there for it. And then when it comes to these interior areas here, some of these we're never going to see. We still want to apply some texture to them, but you know, we're very likely never going to see the top of that, and we're very likely never going to see the top of that, right? These two spaces. One we're definitely not going to see, but either way, we can still fill that in. All right, so something like that's going to give me my character's UVs all set up. I'm going to delete the history here and save, since we have this in place, and then the final thing we need to do is just offset these so that this character can be mirrored over and we can get the symmetry and then do our test bake. So let's go ahead and tackle that next, but that's going to be the start of our layout there and how we can get them nice and organized and scaled appropriately, you know, pushing detail to where it matters and not worrying about where it's not going to. Be sure to like and subscribe so you can catch the next video in the series when it goes live.